picture this moment with me. A mother bird stands at the edge of her nest, watching her babies. They're comfortable, well-fed, protected. Everything they need is right there in that nest. But she knows something they don't. The most loving thing she can do is push them to fly. Nature's wisdom shows us that true love sometimes means stepping away, even when every fiber of our being wants to stay and keep nurturing, keep protecting, keep providing. That's what we're going to explore together today, one of life's most challenging paradoxes. Sometimes the greatest act of love is walking away from those who need us most. I want you to think about someone in your life right now who depends on you. Maybe it's your child, your aging parent, a friend going through tough times, or even an employee who looks to you for every decision. Feel that weight of responsibility on your shoulders, that mixture of pride and pressure that comes with being needed. That quiet voice inside that whispers, "What would they do without me?" Now, let me ask you something that might make you uncomfortable. Could your constant presence, your endless support, your ready availability actually be holding them back from their own growth? Could your greatest act of love be taking a step back? I remember sitting with a dear friend in 2011, Sarah, who ran a successful business consulting firm. She had built it from nothing, poured her heart and soul into every client relationship. Her clients adored her. They wouldn't make a single decision without her input. She was their rock, their guru, their safety net. And she was exhausted. "I feel like I'm failing them if I'm not available 24/7. She confided. They need me. But here's what Sarah couldn't see. By being constantly available, by solving every problem, by being the answer to every question, she was unknowingly creating dependency. Her clients weren't developing their own problem-solving. They weren't building confidence in their own judgment. They weren't growing. It's like teaching someone to ride a bicycle. There comes a point where you have to let go of the seat. Yes, they might wobble. Yes, they might even fall. But that's how they learn to balance. That's how they discover their own strength. Think about the ocean for a moment. The tide comes in, bringing life-giving nutrients to the shore. But it must also go out. It's in that ebb and flow that life thrives. Not in constant abundance, not in perpetual presence, but in the rhythm of giving and withdrawing. We often mistake dependence for love, necessity for purpose. We tell ourselves, they need me, therefore I matter. But true love, authentic purpose comes from empowering others to stand on their own feet, to find their own way, to discover their own strength. Let me share another story. In 2010, I met a mother named Linda at a workshop. Her son was 2008 years old, living in her basement, struggling to find his path in life. Every month, she paid his bills. Every week, every day, she worried about his future. She thought she was protecting him, supporting him through a rough patch. But in reality, she was enabling his dependency, stunning his growth, and postponing his journey to self-reliance. But what if he fails? She asked, tears in her eyes. What if he succeeds? I responded, what if, by stepping back, you give him the space to discover his own resilience? 6 months later, Linda made the hardest decision of her life. She told her son he had 3 months to find his own place. She stopped paying his bills. She stopped doing his laundry. It was excruciating for her. There were tears, arguments, accusations of abandonment. But she held firm, not from a place of anger or punishment, but from a deep understanding that this was an act of love. Today, that same young man runs his own successful landscaping business. He's married, has 2 children, and thanks his mother not for the years she carried him, but for the day she forced him to walk on his own. Sometimes our help becomes a hindrance. Sometimes our support becomes a crutch. Sometimes our presence becomes a barrier to someone else's growth. Think about a greenhouse. Young plants need its protection, its controlled environment, its constant care. But if they remain in that greenhouse forever, they'll never develop the strength to withstand real-world conditions. They'll never develop deep roots or resilient stems. They'll never know their true potential. The same principle applies to human relationships. Whether you're a parent, a mentor, a friend, or a leader, there comes a time when the most loving thing you can do is step back. It's not abandonment, it's faith. Faith in their potential, faith in their resilience, faith in their journey. This doesn't mean disappearing completely or withdrawing all support. It means creating space for growth, for discovery, for independence. It means being available without being invasive, supportive without being controlling, loving without being enabling. And which relationships am I currently acting as a greenhouse? Where might I be protecting someone from the very experiences they need to grow? Where have I confused being needed with being loving? Remember, the goal of any meaningful relationship isn't to create dependency. It's to foster independence. It's not to be needed forever. It's to help others discover they had the strength within themselves all along. Consider the ancient art of Japanese pottery called kintsugi. When a pot breaks, instead of discarding it or hiding the cracks, artisans repair it with gold. The broken places become the most beautiful parts, the sources of its unique character, and sometimes we need to allow those we love to break a little, to face challenges, to experience setbacks. It's in repairing themselves that they discover their own gold. Let me share something with you that might sound counterintuitive at first. True strength isn't found in how many people depend on you. It's found in how many people you've helped become independent. Think about that for a moment. Let it sink in. I remember meeting David, a brilliant orchestra conductor, in 2008. He had led his ensemble for over 2 decades, and they had achieved remarkable success under his leadership. Every note, every interpretation, every artistic decision flowed through him. The musicians looked to him for everything. He was their North Star, their musical compass. But one day, he noticed something troubling. During rehearsals, when he asked for input or interpretation suggestions, the musicians stayed silent. They were excellent technicians, but had stopped thinking creatively. They had stopped trusting their own musical instincts. They'd become so dependent on his vision that they had lost touch with their own. I realized, he told me, that I had created an orchestra of followers when I should have been nurturing an ensemble of leaders. So David did something radical. He started missing rehearsals intentionally. Not all of them, but enough to force the musicians to make their own decisions. At first, there was chaos. The musicians felt abandoned, angry, uncertain. But gradually, something magical happened. They started finding their voices. They began making artistic choices. They rediscovered their creative courage. When David returned to each rehearsal, instead of telling them what to do, he asked what they had discovered. He celebrated their innovations, even when they differed from his own vision. He transformed from a conductor who controlled to a conductor who... Today, that orchestra is known not just for its technical excellence, but for its creative vitality. Each musician brings their unique voice to the ensemble. They've learned that true harmony isn't about following one leader perfectly. It's about each person contributing their authentic voice to create something greater than themselves. Where constant presence can become a ceiling that limits others' growth. When we always provide the answers, we prevent others from developing their own wisdom. When we always light the path, we prevent others from learning to navigate in the dark. Think about the times in your own life when you grew the most. Was it when everything was comfortable and someone else was handling all your problems? Or was it when you faced challenges and had to figure things out for yourself? Growth happens in the struggle. Character is built in the challenge. Wisdom is born in the wrestling with difficult questions, not in being handed easy answers. I want you to imagine yourself as a bridge. Bridges are essential. They help people cross over obstacles, navigate difficult terrain, reach new destinations. But a bridge isn't meant to be a permanent residence. Its purpose is to help others get from where they are to where they need to be. Are you being a bridge that people cross over to reach their own potential? Or have you become a comfortable resting place where people have stopped their journey? In 2007, I met a teacher named Margaret who shared a profound insight about this very concept. She had been teaching 4th grade for 30 years, and she noticed a pattern. The students who struggled the most at the beginning of the year, who she was most tempted to help constantly, often showed the most growth when she deliberately held back. It breaks my heart every time. She said, watching them struggle with a math problem or a reading passage, every fiber of my being wants to jump in and show them the answer. But I've learned that my temporary discomfort is the price of their permanent. Margaret developed what she called her 3-minute rule. When a student asked for help, she would wait 3 minutes before responding. In those 3 minutes, she would watch as they tried different approaches, consulted their notes, or asked class, but more often than not, they would figure it out themselves before the 3 minutes were up. Those 3 minutes, she explained, are where the real learning happens. Not in my explanation, but in their exploration. This principle applies far beyond the classroom. In every relationship and every role where others depend on us, we must ask ourselves, am I giving 3 minutes? Am I allowing space for struggle, for discovery, for growth? Consider the metaphor of a garden. A skilled gardener knows that plants need space to grow. If you plant them too close together, they compete for resources and none of them reach their full potential. The same is true in human relationships. Sometimes our constant presence, our overwhelming support, our need to be needed creates a crowded emotional space where growth becomes impossible. This isn't about cold abandonment or harsh withdrawal. It's about loving someone enough to let them stumble, fail, and discover their own strength. It's about trusting in their innate capacity to grow, to learn, to evolve. I remember working with a business owner in 2012 who was struggling with this concept. He had built his company from the ground up, and he prided himself on being available to his employees 24/7. He answered every call, solved every problem, made every decision. His employees loved him for it. But his company had hit a ceiling. I don't understand, he said. I give them everything they need. Why aren't we growing? The answer was in his question. By giving them everything, he was actually giving them nothing. No chance to develop decision-making skills, no opportunity to learn from mistakes, no space to develop leadership capabilities. We developed a simple but powerful exercise. Every time an employee came to him with a problem, before offering a solution, he would ask them 3 questions. What do you think we should do? What's the worst that could happen if we tried your approach? How would you handle that worst-case scenario? At first, these questions were met with resistance. Employees were uncomfortable being pushed to think through problems themselves. But gradually, something shifted. They started coming to him not with problems, but with solutions. Not with questions, but with well-thought-out proposals. Not seeking approval, but seeking partner. His company transformed from a one-man show to a collaborative enterprise where every employee thought like an owner. And it all started with him having the courage to step back, to create space for others to step forward. This is the paradox we must embrace. Sometimes the most supportive thing we can do is withdraw our support. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is refuse to help. Sometimes the most empowering thing we can do is walk away. Let's talk about something that's rarely discussed, the guilt that comes with stepping back. That gnawing feeling in your gut when you see someone you love struggling and you choose not to intervene. That voice in your head that whispers, if you really cared, you would help. I want to share a powerful story from 2005 about a woman named Rachel who ran a mentoring program for young entrepreneurs. She was brilliant at what she did, pouring her heart and soul into each mentee's success. But she noticed a troubling pattern. Many of her successful graduates struggled once they left her program. They had learned to rely so heavily on her guidance that they couldn't trust their own instincts. One day, a former mentee came back to her office in tears. Her business was struggling, and she desperately wanted Rachel's advice. Instead of jumping in with solutions like she usually would, Rachel did something different. She said, I believe in your ability to figure this out. I'm not going to give you answers, but I'll sit here with you while you think through it yourself. For 2 hours, they sat together. Rachel watched as her former mentee cycled through frustration, fear, and finally, clarity. By the end of those 2 hours, the young entrepreneur had developed her own solution, one far better than anything Rachel could have suggested because it came from her own understanding of her business. This is what I call loving withdrawal. The art of being present without being prescriptive, supporting without solving, caring without controlling. It's one of the most challenging skills to master because it goes against our natural instincts to help. Think about learning to swim. No one learns to swim by watching someone else do it. No one learns to swim by having someone else move their arms and legs for them. You learn to swim by getting in the water, feeling the buoyancy for yourself, discovering how your body moves, even swallowing a little water along the way. The instructor's job isn't to prevent every mistake. It's to create a safe space for mistakes to become learning opportunities. In 2009, I worked with a family therapist who shared a profound insight. She said, "The hardest part of my job isn't helping families solve their problems. It's convincing them to stop solving problems for each other." She explained how families often get locked into rigid roles, the fixer, the victim, the mediator. These roles might seem helpful on the surface, but they prevent people from developing their own problem-solving skills. She introduced what she called the empty chair technique. When family members came to her with conflicts, she would point to an empty chair and say, "That's where the solution sits." But only the person with the problem can sit there. It was her way of teaching them that while support is important, each person must be the primary agent of change in their own life. How do we know when it's time to step back? How do we distinguish between necessary support and enabling dependency? Here are 4 signs to watch. First, when you find yourself solving the same problems repeatedly. If someone keeps coming to you with the same issues, your help might be preventing them from learning from their experiences. Second, when you feel resentful about being needed. This is often a sign that the relationship has become unbalanced, that you're giving more than is healthy for either party. Third, when you can predict their next crisis. If you're anticipating their problems before they happen, you might be more invested in their growth than they are. Fourth, when your help is becoming increasingly ineffective. If your solutions aren't creating lasting change, it might be time for a different approach. But knowing when to step back is only half the challenge. The harder part is actually doing it. So let me share some practical strategies for loving withdrawal. Start with small steps. You don't have to withdraw all support at once. Begin by delaying your responses. Give them time to sit with their challenges before jumping in with solutions. When they ask for your opinion, reflect the question back to them. Be clear about your intentions. Explain that your stepping back is an abandonment. It's an act of faith in their capabilities. Help them understand that you're not withdrawing your love or support, just changing how you express it. Create a support network. Help them identify other resources and people they can turn to. This prevents them from feeling completely alone while reducing their dependence on you specifically. Celebrate their independence. When they solve problems on their own, acknowledge it. Help them see their own growth and capability. Remember the lesson of the butterfly emerging from its cocoon. If you help it by breaking open the cocoon, you doom it. The struggle to emerge is what strengthens its wings for flight. Your role isn't to eliminate the struggle, it's to create a safe space for that necessary struggle to occur. In 2011, I met a successful business leader who shared a unique perspective on this. He said, "I used to measure my success by how many decisions I made each day. Now I measure it by how many decisions I empower others to make." He had learned that true leadership isn't about being the answer to every question. It's about creating an environment where others can find their own answers. This shift in thinking transformed his organization. He implemented what he called decision journals, where employees would document not just their decisions, but their thought process behind them. Instead of telling them whether their decisions were right or wrong, he would review these journals with them, helping them strengthen their decision-making muscles. The result is employees became more confident, more innovative, and more resilient. Problems that once would have paralyzed the organization until he could solve them were now being handled effectively at all levels. He had created what he called a leadership ecosystem where growth and independence were the natural outcomes. Let's delve deeper into something that might feel uncomfortable, the fear that holds us back from stepping away. Not their fear, but ours. The fear that if we're not needed, we're not valuable. The fear that if they succeed without us, we somehow become less important. In 2004, I encountered a remarkable woman named Patricia who ran a nonprofit organization. She had built it from nothing, working countless hours, sacrificing everything for its success. Her staff revered her. They called her the heart and soul of the organization. And that was precisely the problem. I realized, she told me, that being indispensable is actually a failure of leadership. If this organization can't function without me, I haven't built something sustainable. I built something fragile. This insight led her to make a bold decision. She took a 3-month sabbatical, completely disconnecting from the organization. No emails, no phone calls, no emergency consultations. She left clear protocols in place, but beyond that, she trusted her team to figure things out. The first month was chaos. The second month was challenging. The third month, that's when the magic happened. Staff members who had always deferred to her started taking initiative. New leaders emerged. Creative solutions were found to old problems. The organization didn't just survive, it evolved. When Patricia returned, she found an organization that was stronger, more resilient, and more dynamic than when she left. Her absence had created space for others to grow into their full potential. More importantly, she discovered something about herself. Her value wasn't diminished by their independence. If anything, it was enhanced. She had evolved from being a leader who was needed to a leader who empowered. Our worth isn't measured by how many people depend on us. It's measured by how many people we've helped become independent. Think about the most influential teachers in your life, the ones who really made a difference. Were they the ones who gave you all the answers? Or were they the ones who taught you how to find answers for yourself? The ones who held your hand through every challenge? Or the ones who taught you to trust your own capabilities? In 2010, I worked with a group of parents struggling with college-age children who seemed unable to launch into independent adulthood. One father shared a powerful realization. I thought I was protecting my son by solving all his problems. Now I realize I was actually telling him that I didn't trust him to solve them himself. This led to an important discussion about the messages our help sends. When we rush in to fix every problem, what are we really communicating? Are we saying, I love you, or are we saying, I don't trust you to handle this? Are we expressing care, or unconsciously undermining confidence? Consider the difference between these two approaches. Scenario, Wendy. Your friend is facing a difficult decision. You immediately offer advice, share your experience, tell them what you would do. Scenario 2 is, your friend is facing a difficult decision. You ask questions that help them think it through. You listen, you reflect back what you hear, you help them connect with their own wisdom. The first approach might feel more helpful in the moment, but the second approach does something far more valuable. It helps them develop their own decision-making muscles. It communicates trust in their judgment. It empowers rather than enables. Let me share a powerful exercise I learned from a wise mentor in 2006. She called it the trust transfer. Here's how it works. When someone comes to you for help, take a moment to identify the specific capability they need to develop. Is it decision-making, problem-solving, emotional regulation? Then consciously transfer your trust in that capability. Instead of saying, let me help you, say, I trust you to figure this out. Instead of saying, here's what you should do, say, what do you think you should do? Instead of saying, don't worry, I'll handle it, say, I believe in your ability to handle this. This isn't about abandoning people when they need support. It's about changing the nature of that support from doing things for them to believing in their ability to do things for themselves. Think about learning to ride a bike again. There's a moment when you have to let go of the seat, not because you don't care about their safety, but because you care about their growth. That moment requires trust, not just their trust in themselves, but your trust in them. The same principle applies in professional settings. In 2008, I encountered a senior executive who was struggling to delegate. She was working 80-hour weeks while her team was underutilized. When we explored the root cause, she admitted, I'm afraid they'll fail, and their failure will reflect poorly on me. We worked together to reframe this perspective. Yes, they might fail sometimes, but each failure, when supported with reflection and learning, becomes a stepping stone to competence. By trying to prevent all failure, she was actually preventing growth. She started using what she called the growth grid, a simple matrix that helped her decide when to step in and when to step back, risk low growth potential. Delegate entirely. Delegate with support. High risk low growth potential. Handle personally. Collaborate and coach. Collaborate and coach. This framework helped her make more conscious decisions about when and how to withdraw support. It also helped her team understand that her stepping back wasn't abandonment. It was a strategic choice to support their development. Remember, the goal isn't to become unnecessary. The goal is to transform your necessity from being the source of solutions to being the source of empowerment. From being the answer to being the catalyst for others finding their own answers. As we move toward closing our time together, let's address perhaps the most challenging aspect of this journey, the emotional cost of stepping back. Because let's be honest, this isn't just about them. It's about us too. About our identity, about our purpose, about who we become when we choose to let others grow even when it hurts us to watch them struggle. In 2012, I met Anna, a gifted counselor who had been helping people through crises for over 2 decades. She shared something profound about the nature of helping relationships, the hardest truth I've had to learn. She said, is that sometimes my presence, my experience, my wisdom can actually be a barrier to someone's growth. Sometimes the most powerful thing I can do is create space for someone to discover their own inner counselor. She told me about a client who had been seeing her weekly for years. Every session, they would work through the client's challenges and Anna would offer insights and strategies. The client loved these sessions. She would always leave feeling better. But Anna noticed something troubling. There was no fundamental change happening. The client had become excellent at processing things with Anna, but hadn't developed the tools to process things on her own. So Anna did something radical. She suggested they move their sessions to monthly instead of weekly. The client was terrified. Anna was nervous, but she knew it was necessary. In the spaces between sessions, something remarkable. The client started journaling, developed her own coping strategies, and began trusting her own judgment. She didn't need less support. She needed more space to develop her own strength. It's us to a fundamental truth. Sometimes our greatest act of service is to get out of the way. Think about it like teaching someone to read. In the beginning, they need you to read everything to them, then they need you to read with them, then they need you to listen while they read to you, and finally, they need you to leave them alone with the book. Each stage requires a different kind of presence, a different kind of absence. But here's the part we rarely talk about, the void we feel when someone no longer needs us in the same way. The identity crisis that can come with stepping back. The question that haunts, sup, I'm not needed, who am I? In 2007, I worked with a group of empty nesters struggling with this very question. I spent 20 years being needed every minute of every day. Now my children are independent, and I feel like I've lost my purpose. But then I realize, hey, their independence isn't the end of my purpose. It's the fulfillment of it. This is the paradigm shift we need to embrace. When someone no longer needs us, it's not a failure, it's a success. It's not a loss, it's an achievement. We haven't become less valuable. We've proven our value in the most profound way possible. Let me share with you what I call the 3 truths of loving withdrawal. Stepping back is not stepping away. When we create space for others to grow, we're not abandoning our relationship with them. We're elevating it. We're moving from a relationship of dependency to one of mutual respect and shared growth. Their success without you doesn't diminish your contribution to their journey. Just as a rocket needs tremendous thrust to break free from Earth's gravity, but can then soar on its own, your intensive support during crucial periods gives others the momentum to eventually fly independently. Truth 3. The end of being needed is the beginning of being appreciated. When someone no longer needs you to solve their problems, they can finally see you for who you are rather than what you can do for them. As we reach these final moments together, I want to leave you with a powerful visualization exercise. Imagine yourself standing on a beach. In your hands, you hold a beautiful paper lantern. Inside that lantern is everything you've given to others, your support, your wisdom, your care, your protection. Feel the weight of it. Feel the responsibility of it. Now imagine releasing that lantern into the night sky. Watch as it rises, carrying your gifts upward. Notice how it doesn't disappear, it transforms. It becomes a light that others can navigate by rather than a crutch they lean on. It becomes a beacon of inspiration rather than a source of dependency. This is your new role. Not to be the light that others live by, but to be the spark that helps them find their own light. Members, every time you resist the urge to solve someone's problem, you're giving them the gift of discovering their own strength. Every time you step back instead of stepping in, you're creating space for someone else to step up. Every time you choose to trust instead of control, you're helping someone trust themselves. The journey of forcing yourself to leave when others need you isn't about abandonment. It's about evolution. It's about having the courage to transform relationships from dependency to partnership, from necessity to choice, from obligation to... So I challenge you. Look at your relationships, personal and professional. Where are you needed? Where are you necessary? And most importantly, where might your necessity be limiting someone else's growth? Have the courage to step back. Have the faith to create space. Have the wisdom to know that true love, true leadership, true service sometimes means walking away. Not because you don't care, but because you care enough to let others find their way. For in the end, the greatest gift we can give another person is not our constant presence, but our faith in their ability to thrive in our absence. Thank you.